the win for me with PeaTos is that as the creative director and for a small organization is you have access to the highest touch points of the business. And then you also have access to I would say 80% of the things that I put my hands on make it to market, which is unprecedented for a creative in the space.
All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Mogul Insider Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with my man, Dan the Man. That's what I'm going to call you.
I'll take it.
Have you ever been called that before?
I have. I've been called a number of things, and that's definitely one of them.
Well, hey, I appreciate you for hopping on the podcast. We were actually offline just talking about how the evolution of the humanity has turned into and how fast things are changing. And let's kind of start there. Let's dig into that, and then we can kind of converse and go from there. Maybe actually first, let's begin by giving people a 15-second elevator pitch of who you are, where you come from, and what you're about.
Well, yeah, okay, cool. I'm Dan Cady. I'm an Angelino, born and raised. It's rarefied air, like to be a native and have lived here most of my life. And I'm a creative professional, 20 years of experience. So right now I'm the creative director for a snack food company out of Los Angeles. We're called PeaTos. We offer analogs to most of your favorite conventional junk food snacks, but what we've done to differentiate is to make snacks with a pulse flour base, so peas, fabas, and lentils. So we're basically junk food snacks, junk food taste made from peas.
Very cool. So
PeaTos are out in the market right now. We have two flavors. I'm just going to do the pitch because, might as well, right?
Yeah.
So PeaTos, basically we have the crunchy curls, which are, you'll be familiar with a Cheeto, but it's the equivalent of that with a pea-based, pea flour base. And it's fantastic. And then we just released a ring, which is like heads and shoulders above a Funyun. So, yeah.
So interesting that you guys are in that industry, because I feel like what kind of impact have you noticed in the past couple of weeks, and how have you guys shifted?
Well, so we've sort of tried to, as a small business, your best efforts are to stay nimble and try to respond rather than react, I think, is sort of the critical strategy. Sort of look at where the market's going, where your customers are looking for your product, and how you can best meet them there. And so, we sort of just did a baseline shift to make sure that all of our inventories were strong, so our supply chain was connected, and that we looked at, redirecting some of our strategy to focus more succinctly on e-commerce.
So you guys are now selling through your website or through?
Yes, and that was actually a play that we were making, and then it sort of was very timely in that as we were launching this strategy, the world was shifting, and so we just sort of doubled down on our efforts to elevate that position for the business. So we just made it, we barked as much as we could. PeaTos are available online, and we sell on Amazon and we sell on our own site.
Very cool. And so being part of the creative team in a small business, what does that exactly mean? Because usually I've noticed that people who have a much bigger business usually have a creative team. It's not necessarily for the smaller businesses.
Sorry, I just have my wife's walking in the door, so I just want to let her know that we're on air. So.
No worries.
Okay. So what's really cool about personally for me, what's been really fulfilling about the position is, as a creative, and I've run the gauntlet and the gamut for a myriad of industries and sizes, shapes, and what have you, from startup to Fortune 500 to tech to CPG. And what's been really cool about this romp with PeaTos is that, as a creative, it's hard to hang on one second. Sorry. Cruise, yeah. This is the new normal. This is the work at home life. Like everything sort of overlaps now.
All is good. Go for it.
and my little den in my own office is like high traffic area. So whenever we do these sort of things, it's like little feet just come scampering through, and that's part of like, you know, the adjustment for this new period. But anyways, back to that. The win for me with PeaTos is that as the creative director and for a small organization is you have access to the highest touch points of the business, and then you also have access to I would say 80% of the things that I put my hands on make it to market, which is unprecedented for a creative in the space.
And so what are you like involved in exactly?
Everything from, you know, brand voice to brand tone to look and feel. So essentially it's the personality of the company. I'm sort of that's an organic process for the whole team. So it's very collaborative, and we've taken an interesting approach to the way that we've launched the brand, in that we looked at our brand as a unique personality in and of itself, and we serve it like a personality. And like one of the strategies we have is we've workshopped the brand as if we were writing for the story arc of a television show, for example, because we know that snacking has such a broad universal appeal that we sort of posit the notion that like PeaTos is a sitcom and we're writing it for a broad spectrum of people, and it has different personality touch points, and we sort of cater to those personality touch points through a strategic brand voice.
So from talking about this from a creative perspective, for other small businesses, when it comes to creating a voice to their brand, especially in today's atmosphere, what would you recommend where would you recommend starting? Because what I've noticed is a lot of businesses were not ready for this immersive push into the digital world, and a lot of them are having to kind of like adapt really fast and not sure what to do. And so what have you done? I know you said about e-commerce, but like more in specific, what have you done that's worked that you can probably share, or maybe just from your background knowledge that you might give advice for whoever's listening?
Well, I think the critical thing is to have a clear understanding of the value that your product or offering has to your marketplace, right? Like to your consumer. And I know that's like very pedestrian and that's very run-of-the-mill marketing advice, but the truth of the matter is if you know the real value that I guess the best thing that I've heard is if you were to personify your product, service, or offering, and then you were to inquire with your customer base what they would specifically ask of your customer, of your product for their needs, like what would you hire my product to do? Or what would you hire my service to do for you directly? And it's like, if you can define that, then you know what your demand is. And then at that point, you figure out like the shortest path to make that demand available to that customer base, right? Like it's really simple. Like for us, our biggest, like PeaTos, for example, PeaTos are designed to offer a better for you. And we don't like that word because we just want to offer a superior snack experience that just happens to have a more beneficial nutritional profile, right? So the way that we serve our audience is that we offer a snack food in a familiar form that there's a broad affinity for, and we do it in a way that gives you more protein, more fiber, and all natural and clean ingredients, right? So we know that's our differentiator and that's our demand. Now we just point it at the audience where they're looking for it, right? So whether that's in Kroger, which is where we're distributed, or online, and then we just hammer that message home. Like, hey, looking for a superior snack experience, right? Then go to PeaTos because we offer that.
So in terms of talking about hammering a message home, let's get into content for a second, because now it's the most important thing out there, making sure that you're not just spreading your message, but the way you're delivering it is also in a way where people can understand. What tactics do you take as a company to curate content, and what like advice do you have for people that are listening in terms of like what type of content should they be making right now with what's going on?
Well, this sort of interaction is one of the the high watermarks. The digital space. I mean, if anybody is a fervent consumer of marketing media and the thought leaders. I mean, Gary Vee is always talking about publish content is king, right? That's been the narrative. Like I started my in the digital space in 2000, and at the precipice of the dot-com boom, and then through the bust. And then I went, I started with Belkin Components and was part of one of the first interactive multimedia teams in-house in Los Angeles. And it was unprecedented at the time. And we were so everything was sort of uncharted, and user experience and UX, UI, SEO, all of those things, they weren't common nomenclature. They were all undiscovered and uncharted paths. And so, gleaning those insights and then pulling them forward through, I was the senior designer for hobbles.com. And I may be going off on a tangent here because I sort of lost my thread. I don't even remember what the original question is. But talking about the digital space,
content and how
from the jump, like all the way back then, it was obvious to us that good content, rich content, was a critical part of any communication strategy. And,
so why do
I think
a lot of companies don't have rich content? Because it's not like.
Well, I think what happens is, and it's sort of like, if you look at the model right now, and it's sort of one of the challenges that we face is like Instagram, right? Like, and I know I'm a little, look, you can see all the gray, right? So I'm the old man and the traditional marketing strategies. So I'm sort of the guy who's like, I remember the onset of social media, and I was one of those guys, hey, you kids, get off my lawn, the new paradigm, all of those things, right? But I've sort of come full circle on it, recognizing the value of it, in that I don't know, man. Like it's hard because right now nobody wants to be marketed to, right? Like that's the truth of the matter, and that's why those platforms are so nobody likes to be sold a bill of goods. Like, and so my point is like,
sold, that's true, but I feel like at the end of the day, like
everyone's being marketed to all the time.
Sure.
And so the notion is that we're all building our personal brands, and we're all carrying our own banners, and we're all trying to aggregate likes and followers and all of those things, and get those sort of like, and this is more personal philosophy than it is like, a level of business philosophy, but it's like, I think the real crux of it is really understanding your true authentic voice in the noise. Right. And then it's also like mass media is sort of an old format. Like, the notion that you can pay to build an audience that's going to serve your business just by the proxy of having no other options. Like there's so much content, there's so much out there, there's so much happening all the time, that the best that you can do is just make sure that you're showing up with a quality product and an understanding who really wants to hear your message. You're not going to serve everybody, and I know that sort of sounded diluted and sort of arbitrary to formulate that point, because it circled around my head a few times before it came out of my mouth.
No worries.
But the point is like, the truth of the matter is like, the best you can do is have an authentic voice and offer a really great service. And then if you can do that consistently, you'll find your audience, right? Like, and so what, I guess the point to your question is, companies are looking to try to win. It's not a power and numbers game anymore. Like, you're not trying to get hundreds of thousands of peoples, whereas the ideal is to get 10,000 dedicated people.
Yes, that's true. And social media allows you to do that.
And so, and like it, and it's not a phrase that I coined or anything like that. I mean, Seth Godin is probably one of my personal heroes in the marketing game. And it's because he sort of walks that path of altruism, but then also professionalism, and it's that notion of like, serve a community and do better things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And out of curiosity, like when you say like do better things, let's talk strategy, because I'm curious right now just to brainstorm with you, so that whoever's watching can maybe get an idea or two. Content is king right now. A lot of companies don't know how to make content though. I'm in that space, and it's like, give me a second. Yes. See, it happens.
No,
To both of
it
us.
happens. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's part for the
it
course.
happens to the both of us. Um, but yeah, like a lot of people don't know where to start. I've realized that because that's what I do. I'm in the content game. I'm in this space. I do this all day, every day, and so many companies don't necessarily understand where to go and how to go about it. So,
You start with knowing your story,
mhm.
right? Like what's your story, right? And I mean, it sounds so rudimentary, but it's the baseline for. They say, again, it's marketing is what you tell the world. Is there something else I can help with? Sorry, Siri thought I said
God, I
called
love
her.
this. This is super like, I love this.
Yeah, sorry, Siri. I wasn't talking to you.
Look, man, I think, Dan, I think the world of professionalism is gonna end up it's gonna end up dying. Not dying, but the modern hip age is gonna take over now because of this whole new home vibe.
Well, I don't know so much about that too, because there's a lot to be said about personal interaction,
Yeah.
and I know we're raising a generation. I got two little ones, and their faces in a screen more times than I'm comfortable with, and that's just being honest. But sometimes that's the reality of the world,
Oh,
but for myself and my family and my wife, our priority is also to make sure that we understand what empathy means,
yeah.
and that gets flattened out in these types of scenarios far too often. And honestly, it's one of my bigger challenges with the world at large, is that we lose a level of interaction. The irony is that the digital experience is called interactivity, but the truth of the matter is interfacing with people and having empathy and compassion and real face-to-face experiences. I think there's gonna be a balance that has to be met at some point.
I agree. I think just like anything else, when something new comes out for a while, it takes a while for humanity to adapt to it. And you got two extremes. You got the one who are using something like there's no tomorrow, like the internet. You have the younger generation who they're just glued to it, and then you have like the older gen who's like not necessarily that used to it. Wants to go out, meet face to face, do things like that. I think what's gonna happen eventually is just a middle ground's gonna happen. Like people will
Oh, for
start
sure.
people will start to connect online because it's easy, it's quick, it's much faster. And then, but that will have to eventually lead for you meeting up face to face. I mean, I was actually talking to my friend about this. Like 10 years ago, if you were playing video games and you met this random person online, you only played video games with them and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the end of that relationship. You don't ever take it anywhere else. You don't know who the guy is. Now I'm noticing, just because of the quarantine, I'm like, I grew up on esports. So now I'm like back to the community, and what I'm noticing, it's like people are like becoming friends. Like they meet on like a Call of Duty lobby, and then next thing you know, they're like texting each other, FaceTiming each other, like hanging out, all that kind of stuff. And so that, I think, I look at it as like it's super dope, in my opinion. I think
It's interesting because I have a couple of people that I have worked with as consultants, or vice versa. They've worked with me as consultants, and I've had so many rich conversations with them, but I couldn't pick them out of a crowd. And that's sort of like, that paradox in and of itself is sort of like odd to me. I haven't found the level of comfort with that I think will, and maybe it's generational and maybe it'll be an evolution. But for me, it's like, it's weird. Like I can think of like three people. It's like, I know you really, really well, sorta, Yeah.
Yeah.
But I couldn't pick you out of a crowd.
So what's your take right now on this whole like video chat type of deal that's going on? I know we're forced to do it, but how are you feeling about it?
Well, we leaned into it, and it was really cool, man. It was a really proud moment. Like just recently, for the business, we as brand tone of voice, like for PeaTos, we think we're irreverent, we're tongue in cheek, we try to be funny, and not ironic, right? But haha, right? So,
Uh-huh.
see, zing. But so we put together last week on Friday, we put together a comedy showcase. We partnered with Dash Radio, and we partnered with the Laugh Factory and took over the Laugh Factory feed for an hour. And we ran it just like we would at a comedy club. So we had a host, a couple of openers, a feature in the middle, and we ran it like a traditional show. And we did it to benefit. And another plug real quick, for the month of April, every time you go to PeaTos.com, every purchase you make, a portion of those proceeds are going to go forward to feed or to help feed America in their COVID-19 relief effort. So there was like three things to unpack there, right? So one, meet your audience where they are. Everybody's at home. Zoom, man. If I had any inclination, I would have bought stock in Zoom before this thing, man. Like they're the name, right? Like Zoom is a verb. That's branding, right? That's the power of a brand. When something becomes so prolific and so ubiquitous that it adopts. Video chatting used to be, I'm going to Skype you. Now it's Zoom, right? Like that's the power of a brand. And that's telling the story effectively, because the consumers let us all know. The marketplace said, we are Zooming, right? The marketplace back in the day said, we are going to Skype. Marketplace back in the day, that's branding, right? It's amazing to me. And that's why I do what I do, because it's like the phenomenon of it's like, wow, that's impressive.
Dude,
so,
do you think Skype was too early to the game?
No, not at all. I think what happens is, for us, we again, I'll bring it back to PeaTos. Like our CEO constantly says, we want to be the disruptor that is eventually disrupted, right? Because it's always going to be, everyone's looking to level up. And at some point, we'll be the tip of the spear, and then the next guy will be the tip of the spear. Because if it were just Skype, and Skype probably didn't have the insights that Zoom had to offer the marketplace, hence, being unseated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. I mean,
it's a
guess.
It's an interesting times we're going through right now. How do you see branding and marketing changing as a whole after this whole thing dies down?
Well, and it's back to that whole point of like what the market is looking for, right? And I was speaking to it like the generation, my kids are going to be able to sniff an ad,
like that.
before, they're gonna have instincts around it more succinctly, right? Whereas I come from a generation that sort of was driven by the media feed, right? And that was sort of like what informed my development.
Yeah, my cousin, she's like, I think about like 10 years old now, and she it's crazy to me how aware she is of the space online. Like she came up to me the other day and she was talking to me about a YouTube video, and she was pissed off because every like 2 minutes an ad popped up. She was like actually mad about it. She's like, what the hell? Like, I'm just trying to have fun, enjoy my experience, and these ads keep popping up. Like, I don't want your stuff. And I thought that was so interesting, because I want to talk to her about the same conversation in 10 years from today to see how she thinks of these quote unquote advertisements. And actually, go ahead.
Yeah, no, to that point, I mean, advertising is an inconvenience because for the most part, it's a intrusion. It's done without your permission. It's why we trash so many emails. It's why, so it's a delicate balance to have an authentic conversation. And I think that was the point I was driving at with Instagram. Part of it is knowing that we are a business and we are trying to propagate our message through the marketplace, right? We're supposed to plant flags and be a beacon and, oh, there's PeaTos, go over there, go get them. Right. But the other side of it is when you do that, it's off-putting. And I was just talking about this morning with our director of marketing. It's like on our feed, all of the branded material have less engagement because they're staged. They're inauthentic. They don't look like a natural reflection of an experience with the brand. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to a brand message. So it's this catch-22 where you just find yourself like, well, what do you do? And I don't have an answer. We're still testing these waters too and figuring out like what's effective. But the bottom line is at the core of it is when you have a good product, maybe you can experiment through the medium on the back of the notion that if I'm going to use some colorful language, but if you're out there peddling bullshit and nobody wants it, you're not going to be very successful. But if you have a great product, then you have a little bit of wiggle room to experiment with your message, because you're like, at the end of the day, I still have a great product. I just need to find the right way to connect it to the people that are looking for it.
I think, look, man, I think what I've seen happen, and what I've seen with my clients and everyone that I do work with, is that basically marketing and sales, or actually just the way I look at it, is relationship building and building people's trusts has now shifted from talking about your product or solution to now telling a story and being conversational. And
I don't think it's shifted so much as it's become so en masse. When you don't have when okay, so I think it's a there's a lot to unpack there, right? So I think as culturally, right, like where we had a limited range of things to put our attention on, then we were a little bit more inclined to acquiesce what we were being served. Fine, I got 5 channels. There's commercials on all of them. It's the standard. I live with it. Now I got 1,000 channels, the internet, my phone, and I don't have time for your nonsense, right? So, but in order to, but I think, I don't know, if you look at like the hero brands of the world, they've always had a great story to tell.
And
like,
that's why they're so big, though.
Nike, Apple. I mean, those are just 2 of mine personal heroes.
I guess to rephrase what I was saying is not necessarily shifted. It's that the better side of marketing has always been the conversational storytelling. It's just now the world's realizing it and having to forcefully adapt to it. And I'm talking about just what I've seen on like social media. Like, take TikTok as an example, right? Have you played with that yet?
I have not, because I'm old. And
no,
and that's unfair. No, I honestly, I've sort of, we've dabbled in it, and we're unsure of how it fits our brand story at the moment. Like, it's not that we're averse. It's just when you only have so much bandwidth as a small organization, you sort of tend the part of the garden you can touch, which is one of my favorite expressions. So it's like when you only have so much energy, and that's the other part of it too, is trying to cover all of the bases is impossible, right? So TikTok, I know it's going to be a force, that I'd be foolish to say otherwise, you know, but understanding how it's applicable to my audience and at the moment is something that I don't have a grasp on.
Sure. And the thing is, see, like I when I was saying is like TikTok, if you download TikTok and you go through it, you get to a point where you can watch an ad and not even realize it's an advertisement. Only towards the end, you're like, oh, wow, this was an ad. So they've integrated content in a way where it's so flowing, like, and the way influencers are engaging.
That's not a new strategy. I mean,
it's not a new strategy. It's just done much better due to the UI UX design of the app, the way it's done. Like if I'm on Instagram and I'm scrolling down, it pops up and says this is an ad, and I can tell
sponsored by.
And on TikTok, the first 3 seconds of the video, it's just a regular video that pops up. Once you're like 5 seconds in, under it a button opens up that says click here to learn more. So the first like 5-6 seconds, which is more than enough to get the person's attention on whatever product you're trying to sell, doesn't seem like an ad at all. And so it's not a new strategy. Look, again, I go back, this new, I think I said it incorrectly. Like, the marketing world hasn't shifted. It's not new. I think it's just evolving. It's getting better at doing it. And it's only going to get better. Right. And just like anything else, like the way, I mean, the way I was talking to someone about this a month ago or so, is just the way like technology or anything evolves. Nothing around us is new. Like communication isn't a new thing. Transportation isn't new. Like before cars, we had horses. Before horses, whatever, we were walking.
Sure.
It's just all we're really doing is just adapting to our environment and creating tools that allow us to do the job better. That's it. Um,
Well, and so to that point, and it's sort of like, which is why, like, I was immediately dismissive to social media, why I was immediately dismissive to TikTok, as you said. But the trick of the matter is to look beyond um, your own aversions and your own comfort level, and move beyond that to figure out like the viability of the platform, right? Like,
yeah.
so I'm only doing myself a disservice if I dismiss something, absolutely, right, without sort of any level of investigation. And I think that's sort of like culturally who we are, and it's sort of, I don't know, it's not to your point, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just different incarnations of it as it happens for different generations, and the way that they process it, and becomes pattern,
Mhm.
right? So it's like understanding the patterns, and then how to keep yourself from becoming trapped in your own patterns.
I have another input to add to this. Let me know what you think about this. Change
Hmm.
is tough. People don't like change, but however, now we have to adapt and change really fast and really quick. And I think that's a part of the problem, is that the more the market evolves, the faster we need to change. So we're not necessarily getting comfortable with our ways. And so we're having like look, like TikTok came out. I'm pretty sure in a year, in 2 years or 3 years, whatever, like another platform can come out. There's over 100 social media platforms out there, and we only really know about like the 5 or 6 main ones that are like big. The point is, there's always something new, always something out there, and so
100%. And we're only familiar with our own microcosms, right? Because we only know what's in our periphery, and then what's beyond that. Like, yeah, you just mentioned all of the ones that are prominent in the Western world, but then there's everything that's going on in Asia, and all of the other, multinational versions of social media, and a population that we have, the Indian subcontinent.
yeah, I
So
agree. I agree. I think it's really just when I talk about like new platforms, it's just capitalizing on underpriced attention. Really, like you talk about someone like Gary Vee, he's really big on this. Like LinkedIn, for example, is a huge funnel for underpriced attention right now. And I think Instagram is actually a little bit on the more.
I think the challenge I have with that strategy is that what happens is it becomes like a land grab, and so what what happens is that the platform becomes diluted because it's oversaturated.
Hmm,
And I think the real, and it all goes back to um, clarity in message, authenticity in message, true value to the consumer. And I think you can beat that drum in any platform and find success. What really separates or differentiates our efforts is the quality of the engagement, and how much we can build a relationship within in those platforms, regardless of what it is. I mean, even now in Facebook, Facebook has sort of been left in the dust, and we find that uh, I can't remember. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I take these little nuggets and I put them in my pocket and I break them out like they're my own. But I heard somebody breaking it down really effectively. Um, they were saying, so attribution's important, because I'd like to give people credit for the things that they
sure.
see it in me. But it's like Facebook is like the town square, where, or like a swap meet, if you will, with maybe a high volume of traffic, and not a lot, like just really limited amounts of value for people to point their attention to. And then you look at Instagram, and it's like a curated boutique where you go there for specific things, and you have a level of expectation. And so what I think, so back to your question earlier about like what I feel a lot of brands get is they don't keep top of mind the psychology of usability, right? Like what their user expectation is, where they're telling the story. And that's one of the things that we've experimented a lot with at PeaTos is we tell the same story because it's our truth, but we tell it in a different fashion because it means something different to the people on Instagram than it does when we tell it on Facebook.
I
And
love that. I love that. I want you to stop right there for a second. So I love that you pointed that out. So you're basically saying that curate the content for the people that are listening and not for what you think is right for yourself.
That's right, because that's the difference between marketing and branding, right? Like if I'm telling the true story, then it's going to be received the same way, right? Regardless of how I tell it to some degree. I mean, that sounds muddled, but it's like if our message is we're a great junk food tasting experience, but we're made from peas, so we're this much better for you than the average Joe. So you should trade up your snack to trade up your snack experience, right? Like that's the heart of the story, but it may mean that we tell it in a different way. Like it might be more pedestrian and traditional marketing through Facebook, but then we look for the authentic way to connect to the Instagram audience because that's about the snacking experience, right? And also affinity to personality at that point, right? So whereas we would go and tell what would look like a commercial on Facebook, and these are just our recent findings, but it's sort of what I've extrapolated out and sort of not necessarily, it's anecdotal, like there's no science. And I think that's a lot, it's bro science at best, or marketing science at best,
What's
or whatever,
marketing,
right?
man? At the end of the day, it's like a lot of it is theory and a lot of it is like psychology driven. So
But what we're finding is it's like it's the medium dictates the voice, but the voice has to tell the same story.
hmm. The medium dictates the voice, but the voice has to tell the same story. I think that's the golden nugget for this episode. That's interesting. Okay.
So
I should quote you on that.
sure, maybe someone will put that in their pocket, and then I'll hear it parroted back on a podcast, and that'll be the win for me.
You'll be like, hey, it worked.
Yeah, put it out in the world. But yeah, I mean, because like we've been really, and one thing that we've done really, and hats off to our CEO for being bullish on it and happy enough to go along with it. Like he's really prioritized that our brand tone and our brand personality is critical to who we are in the world. And so, and there's not, and it's not in the way of trying to manipulate the message or own the marketplace through like mass proliferation. It's like his authentic notion about this, like PeaTos is a pillar of brands,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to build on that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, hey, Dan, I appreciate you a lot for your time. Where can people find you if they want to pick your brain, connect with you, get to know you a little bit more?
So I am on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok yet, but that's probably coming because I'm like I said, I'm not averse, and maybe we can chat offline and you can give me
Sure.
the 1-2 on how to get this old dog off the porch.
Sure.
But I'm on IG, Killart at Instagram. I make a little ruckus. I'll plug the band, Tijuana Knife Fight, and go to PeaTos.com for the month of April and make sure that you support Feed America and their efforts to help displaced kids during this really interesting time that we're in. That's the other thing too, is at the end of the day, at my heart of hearts, like if you not only service the product, but service to the community. So if there's ever an opportunity to give back, it's something that's powerful, and it's the only real true currency that we have, especially in light of circumstances that are unprecedented like today. Just be a good person, man, and do what you can to help other people.
Yeah.
And not at the benefit of your own personal gain, but at the benefit of humanity.
I agree.
And I know that's very woo, man, but it's the truth.
No, I couldn't have said that better, especially with what's going on right now. We got to connect and really care about each other more than ever.
Dude, in small businesses, like if you're in LA, like I'm plugging all my friends, so Rad Coffee, drinking Rad Coffee, just the big chains are going to survive. And as much as I hate to say it, and I'm not trying to take a dump on any of them because they're doing their thing, but it's sort of like in the food chain, do everything. I love the tide that raises all boats, man, and make that effort every chance you get.
Yep. Well, all right, then. Hey, I appreciate you so much for hopping on the podcast. Hopefully, once this episode airs, we'll definitely get it rock and rolling. This is exciting. Thank you so much for your input. And
Cool, man. Thank you so much.